Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crazy Show. Today we're going to talk about the importance of education with IPS, the African American Council, and its importance in the community and worldwide, and one more topic that's basically getting a lot of attention, but it's been thrown up under the bus a little bit. We're going to highlight it today: human trafficking. I'd like to welcome to the show Dr. Kenneth Allen.
Hey, Andre, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I appreciate you taking the time. Tell the viewers a little bit about who you are before we get into these topics.
Absolutely. I'm a native of Gary, Indiana, was born and raised there. I graduated from historic Theodore Roosevelt High School
Okay.
in 2001. That's also the same year I moved to Indianapolis. When I first moved here, I got very involved in what people refer to as politics. I began working for the Indiana House of Representatives, and I was the page coordinator. For those that may not be familiar with the page program, it's an opportunity for students from all across the state, at least in grades fifth grade and up, to come down and kind of serve as an assistant for their legislative for the day. They get an opportunity to run errands throughout the state house. They get a tour of the state house and really just understand how the legislative process works. And so that was my kind of entryway into politics, so to speak. And so it's afforded me a number of opportunities, both in the for-profit and government sector.
You said Gary Roosevelt.
Yes, sir.
You guys are famous for track and field.
Absolutely.
And you know how I know, because my internship was John Marshall High School as the girls track and field coach.
Wow.
And I really knew nothing about Indiana because I'm from Georgia.
Okay.
And I remember the girls going, Roosevelt, Roosevelt. And I mean, you guys are notorious for like speed. What was it like for you growing up there before you got older and like going to school? What was your family like?
Yeah, so I grew up in a single parent home, but I grew up in a very good community. My church was on the corner. My grandfather's house was next door, which is also where I started my first business, a candy store out of his garage. I lived directly across the street. And then next door to my grandfather was my aunt and uncle. So a very tight-knit community.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the block was my elementary school. But unfortunately, during the time in which I grew up in, Gary was known all across the world, not just for the Jackson 5 or Michael Jackson, but we were literally known as the murder capital of the world. And so every day we saw violence and different things happen in our community that we realized what you do when you take resources out of the community, how bad it really affects the community.
So you grew up during the time, I guess, during the time of the economic collapse of the steel industry in Gary, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What was it like before that, though? Because I heard Gary was very prosperous. You know, everybody wanted to go Crown Point to
by
Gary.
the time I landed on this place called Earth, it had already seen the decline. So all I have is the history. But Gary was the place that you wanted to be. People oftentimes refer to DC as Chocolate City.
Right.
Well, back in the day, Gary was a chocolate city. Gary was the place that people from all over the country were trying to move to. And as a young person, knowing the history, knowing that we had the first black mayor in the entire country, Richard Hatcher, talking about being inspired. I mean, just the history of how that came about was just so inspirational as a kid, seeing that.
When you say you came up during that time of the economic collapse, what was it like in your household? Was it, because you got the, murder capital of the world, you got a mom and dad that's trying to make sure their kids are well protected. What was it like for your mom and dad to keep you and your siblings protected from all this?
Well, my mom was a single mother. My father was around, but not a very impactful role in my upbringing. So she did the best she could. She was an educator for 30 plus years in Gary Public Schools. Didn't make a lot of money as teachers, still don't make a lot of money today. But she tried to do her best, working, multiple jobs to provide for me and my siblings. But it was my community that, it really goes true that it really does take a village to raise a child. And I was so blessed and fortunate to have a village that raised me, that supported me, that encouraged me, and made me into the man that I am today.
What brought you to Indianapolis?
I wanted to go to IUPUI. Okay. So when I used to, I was in a mentoring program called the African American Achievers, which is still going on today, and it's led by State Representative Vernon G. Smith out of Gary. He would bring us down here at least, as many times as we signed up to be actual page.
Okay.
Thusly, when I moved here, I ended up actually running the program.
Really?
And so that was my experience. So like, hey man, Indianapolis is just so much better and so many opportunities that just didn't see growing up in Gary.
Did you, now that you're older, you know, more mature, and you look back, we see two major cities in Adrian Moorhead, Andrea Moorhead is from. I had no idea that she's from Anderson. And my first question to her when we were talking was, with a name like what you got, why ain't you going back to relift the city? And she clearly said that's what her mission is. What's your mission now that you know what Gary is like? You're in a position now. What needs to take place for your hometown to go back up economically?
Yeah, so I think our state for so many years has diverted resources from that area intentionally. Obviously, politics plays a factor in that. We're traditionally a red state. Gary or the Northwest Indiana is typically a blue area.
What does that mean for the viewers that don't understand?
Yeah, so
red and blue.
Yeah, so our state is a traditionally in presidential elections we're a Republican state.
Okay.
By no means we have a Republican governor, a Republican president of the Senate, a Republican House Speaker, and we typically, the presidential candidates typically a Republican typically takes our state. With the exception of Barack, he did make Indiana blue. And so when you look at the demographics of Gary and the voting base, typically Northwest Indiana is typically a Democrat or a blue area. And as a result of that, typically there are a lot of resources that could be afforded to Gary are not afforded to because of being such a, I would say, a strong Republican legislature as well as governor's office.
So there is advantages and disadvantages depending on the color of the region, I guess, right?
Correct, yeah. Because you see, areas that are even rural or even, Republican get the necessary resources because they have great representation at the state house.
So you come back to Indianapolis. I mean, your resume is it's crazy. I mean, we'd spend a whole day going through your shit, man. It's like crazy. How did you get into education?
So my mother was an educator for 30 plus years in the Gary Public Schools. As a matter of fact, she was my first grade and fifth grade educator.
You didn't mess up in school, did you?
I couldn't, but I always had I had access to all the answers too. And so, seeing the service and sacrifice that she provided inspired me to become an educator myself. I mentioned that I started my first business when I was 12 years old in my grandfather's garage. And if you think about, just the setup of my block, my church was literally next door to my candy store. At the end of the block was my elementary school. And so business, they talk about location.
Right.
I was in a prime location and I had my family that was very supportive of my business. And so that gave me an opportunity to teach other young people, like, man, how did this little 12-year-old start a business? So they came and wanted to work for me and learn from me. And so what I was doing, and had no idea I was doing it, I was doing economic development. I was providing my friends with their first summer job. And then I got so many requests to even teach other young people to actually, like, how did you start this business?
Right.
So I began to train and teach other young people about entrepreneurship and financial literacy, and was blessed to do that in spaces like Nigeria, Senegal, Barbados, and Trinidad, and even 30 of the United States, 30 of the states in America. And so I thought that I was going on a track to be a traditional teacher. And when I realized with my work with the Indiana Commission on the social status of Black males, which I served as the chair and 4 years before being elected to the school board, we had one responsibility. And that responsibility was to provide a report to the Indiana General Assembly, which is the Indiana House of Representatives, and the Indiana Senate, as well as the governor's office, on the condition of African American males and what we call 5 focus areas: employment, criminal justice, social factors, health, and education. And as a result of that, we get all the statistics on children in the state of Indiana, and particularly the children of color in education. And Andre, when I saw the statistics that were very alarming, particularly of children of color in the educational land space, I said, man, I have a lot of government experience serving on boards. I have a lot of business acumen. How do I merge these two to change the trajectory? So I began to research, policy. Now, who makes policy? And when you think about it, school board members make policy every day. Our elected officials, particularly our federal legislators, they make policy. Our state elected officials, they make policy. But there's no person that's closer to the education landscape and to really making a difference than our school board members. You can't be anything in life without K through 12 education. You can't be a doctor, a lawyer, a rapper. The skills that you learn in the K through 12 education space prepare you to do and go to the moon and back.
What were some of the things you said that the research and the data overwhelmed you? You know, like took you by surprise. But opportunity is what we all need, no matter what color we are. What were some of the disopportunities that you were seeing? Because when you're sending the kid to school, it starts with the household. It starts with the mom and dad. And if the mom and dad doesn't have or wasn't educated or didn't have the ability to to get the education higher, how much was that affecting the kid? What were some of the things that you were seeing that was really impacting all people, not just people of color, but just people in general? Because economic poverty hits everybody, no matter what color you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. So one of the things that I saw was just the alarming rates that our kids were failing. And I don't believe that the standardized test is a one-all be-all. I think it is a tool in the toolkit to measure children's success. And so when you look at how particularly Black boys were doing in reading comprehension and math, they were at the bottom of the bottom. And it's not that they're not skilled, and it's not they're not talented. It's just that oftentimes they go into classrooms and they don't see people that look like them.
Right.
So I remember the very first time I saw in one of my textbooks an African-American male teacher, and actually was State Representative Vernon Smith. He was in my social studies book. Do you know when I saw State Representative Vernon Smith in my school book, it made me sit up, it made me look up, it made me pay attention. One, because I could identify with the character that was in the book. Prior to that, everybody I had seen in textbooks, everybody that I had seen on the walls did not look like me, did not reflect my experience. And so to see somebody in a classroom, in a book, that was actually somebody from my community, it was so inspirational.
You're bringing back memories, because I remember that happening to me when I was young, probably like 7 or whatever. I know it was during my elementary years, and we were studying history. And I remember in Terre Haute, Indiana, and they was teaching us about the Native Americans.
Wow.
And I remember telling the teacher, where am I at? And I remember her looking dumbfounded. And from there, it became a situation where your son has problems. Why do I have problems? Because I'm trying to find something that I identify to.
Right.
I don't know nothing about the Native Americans, but you're forcing me to learn about the Native Americans. Then all of a sudden you hear George Washington Carver, you hear this and this, but it was selective on what they taught. I was like, I know we have to have more than this. But what else were you seeing? I didn't mean to go away with that.
Even to the point, I'll echo what you said. Even when you talk about Black history today, when you see your friends that post on social media about Black history, it's typically from the cotton field to the current, from the plantation to the present. You never hear about Imhotep. You never hear about building the pyramids with no John Deere.
Right.
It's always a whitewashed, watered down history.
Right.
When our people created science, math, technology.
First open heart transplant.
Everything. When you think about the center of civilizations, our people, but you don't hear that. And even now, if we fast forward to 2024, it's being intentionally removed from classrooms and from schools and from universities all across this America, because they know if we ever find out who we are, what we have the capability of. We didn't come as slaves. We came as kings and queens and scientists and mathematicians. And so they know that if we realize who we really are,
we actually help build European nations.
Absolutely, we did.
And I think it's funny that the universe put you in that seat, because I said the same thing to someone. I was like, what impact? What impact would it have on society as a whole, to know the truth about every nation on this planet? Not to say one is better than the other, blah blah blah, but to minimize to minimize and then later control, wipe out, and depict what you think is good. How does that affect teenagers or kids in as they go into their earlier education?
Yeah. So my grandmother, I love her. She's obviously gone to glory. She passed when I was about 8 years old. But one of the memories I have of her was baking, and she was an excellent baker.
Did she bake? Did she bake biscuits? The one that you
Oh yeah,
not biscuits. The one you can like before there was Pillsbury.
Yeah. And she ain't had no cans. She had ingredients. But when you think about, I think about watching her bake a cake. I don't like butter by itself.
Right.
If you give me a spoon of sugar, it's not gonna be good.
Right.
If you give me some vegetable oil, it's not gonna be good. I ain't gonna eat no flour by itself. Matter of fact, if I started doing this, you would say I was crazy. But when you mix all of those ingredients together and you put them in the oven for the right temperature, you get something that's so tasty and so delicious and so edible. When you take pieces of history out of a child's experience, particularly their history, what you're essentially doing is giving them a stick of butter and say, go be successful. You're giving them flour. It's all of those ingredients, all of that diversity and history that makes them understand who they are, why they're here, and it gives them a purpose. I believe that the two most important times in a person's life is, number one, when they were born, and secondly, when they find out why they were born. My best friend, Dr. Farrar Grace, says you have to ask yourself, if you want to find out your purpose, what is it that you enjoy doing, first and foremost? What is it that you could do for time and time and time and never get paid? And then the third piece of that is, how can you give back? How can you be of service? And once you can answer those three questions, you're set for destiny.
Now, you are part of the IPS system. What's your role with IPS?
Yeah, so I am part of the Indianapolis Public Schools Board of Commissioners. I'm elected at large, which simply means that I cover the entire district. Our board is made up of 7 members, 2 of at large, 1 of which I am, and then 5 district members, which means they have a specific geographic location they provide coverage to. I was elected during the pandemic in 2020 and began serving a 4-year term in January of 2021. And so I will be up on the ballot again in the fall. And I also currently serve as vice president of the Indianapolis Public School Board. And so what that means is that we have one employee, which is the superintendent of public instruction.
Okay.
And then everybody in the district reports to her. And so we can handle the governance and the policy of the school board, and the superintendent handles the management and the day-to-day operation of the actual school district.
Before you took on this role, what was the post-pandemic? What was the data then and the data after the post-pandemic that you were seeing with the IPS system?
Yeah. So unfortunately, in my role as a commissioner with the Indiana Commission on Social Status of Black Males, we saw the data for all schools across the state of Indiana.
Okay.
And nobody was doing exceptionally well, particularly for children of color. Everybody was struggling. The pandemic hit, and it got even worse. We as a district are now first actually seeing the trend go in a better way, but it's been rough. I mean, the social and emotional needs of our students, of just even our teachers as well, in a post-pandemic world has been devastating. So it's going to take some time to really see the needle change. And of course, the pandemic didn't help that.
What were some of the things that you were seeing that did the standardized testing really affect? Why does it affect the minority population more than it does the Caucasian population?
Well, they write the test, in short.
That's what I was getting ready to say. So it's biased.
What that means is that if you are writing a test and you're writing it from your experience and from your lens, and I don't identify with your experience and your lens, I may see a test and say, for example, how deep is an underground pool that's 6 by 6 or something like that? Well, if you're a kid from the hood, you may have never seen an underground pool, so you don't even identify with the question.
Right. You can't even visualize it.
You can't even visualize because you've never seen pools in your community.
Right.
And so I think one of the things we have to do, if that is going to continue to be a tool, and I think it can be a great tool, I think you have to diversify the actual writers of the tool so that they can have experiences and questions that our children can identify. Because if they can't identify it, it's not that they're dumb or ignorant, it's just they simply don't identify with the experience, therefore they fail the question.
So when we talk about a standardized testing in IPS and then the EPIs and so forth, the only universal part of this test is actually math and reading. So then why is it that the minority side of it is still suffering? If we take out the other stuff and just leave the universal part, which is math, reading, why are we still having a struggle curve?
Yeah, because even most of the questions on the standardized test don't speak to the experience. You know, I was a kid that wasn't a great test taker. My mom was an educator, but if you would have looked at my test scores, you would have said this kid is most likely to not succeed. And so we have to understand that a test can't be the only tool that we utilize to measure a student's growth. We can't build prison based on third grade test scores because that is not building potential. So there are other things and other mechanisms we have to utilize for the whole experience to look at the children holistically and not just use this one test or several tests to say, hey, this kid is a success or a failure.
What is when you guys are sitting at the board and you're looking at this data and stuff, how difficult is it to format policy to change these things so we can see a better growth in 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 all areas of not just black, white, Hispanic? How do we see an even playing field, and how do you guys go by addressing a new policy to make it where it's more universal?
Yeah, I'm gonna answer it the long way, but I think I'm gonna give you the answer that you
Okay.
need. So we, as a school district, you know, we able to set our policies for our district, but they have to be in bounds with Indiana law. So the Indiana law dictates what school corporations can do. When you think about the people that make up the Indiana law, our legislator is primarily Republican, primarily white males of influence. And so until you're able to change those folks that are in position to actually write the laws, to make the policies more equitable, more of the experience of our children, we're going to be continuing to have this conversation until we are able to change who the folks are actually writing the laws. And right now, the folks that are writing the laws in Indiana don't reflect, particularly the children in my district. We have about 80% of our district is children of color. 60 different countries are represented within our district. Can't even begin to tell you the many languages that are spoken by the children in our district. But that's not, when you look at our state house, that's not what our state house looks like.
So the state house also need to bring in diversity.
Absolutely.
Basically, what it boils down to, you just
Absolutely.
can't have the good old boy system unwilling to change. But the tricked out part is they see this. I mean, I guess if it doesn't affect you, you're not even worried about it, so to speak.
Correct.
What do you want to see change in as far as IPS and the education system?
I want to see an IPS where every student, no matter what your zip code is, has access to music, has access to arts, has access to extracurricular activities, has the same resources no matter what school they go to. They have the same exact books or the same quality books. Unfortunately, there are a lot of disparities that exist in our district that, you know, not any fault of the current administration or the current board, but many people don't know this. Prior to 1960, you had to be endorsed by the Ku Klux Klan to win the IPS school board. Let me repeat that for the folks that didn't hear that.
Yeah, please.
1960,
Which wasn't that long ago.
if you were not endorsed by the Ku Klux Klan, you were not going to be a successful candidate for the Indianapolis Public School Board. And so many of the policies that we're still operating under today as a district were wrote by white, male members of the Ku Klux Klan. And so we're doing a lot of work to change some of those policies, but that's not something that just happens overnight.
How hard is it to change something like that? I mean, when you sit here and you hear the word KKK,
Yeah,
when you register the 60s, that wasn't that long ago. I was born in the 60s,
not at all.
and policy is still based on those Uncle Tom type laws.
Correct. Yeah. So it is a hard process. I definitely want to shout out my colleague, Commissioner Carey, who's made it her mission to take upon this thing of really looking at all of our policies holistically and bringing them up to speed to make them more equitable for the times in which we live in now.
I really appreciate it, the work you guys are doing. Let's move on to another topic that I had no idea you was deeply involved with. Tell me about your foundation or your the human trafficking part that you're involved in.
Absolutely. So I've been privileged to serve an organization called the Indiana Trafficking Victim Assistance Program, which provides training and education in all 92 counties around human trafficking. In addition to the training aspect, we train law enforcement, educators, business owners, hospitality workers on how to recognize and identify human trafficking. And then we also develop local coalitions across the state that are regional in geography to be able to address the needs of victims of human trafficking. We define victims, or we work with victims or survivors 24 and under. It's a huge issue for the state of Indiana.
Really?
It was one of those issues that I did not know existed until I was privileged to serve on the Super Bowl host committee. And that's when I was like, hey, this happens here. And secondly, it looks different than what I saw mostly imitated in the media. And
What do you mean by that? That it looks different? Because I mean, I'm glad you came and educated me, because if I'm walking down the street, I don't know a human trafficker. I have a daughter, two daughters. I don't know what to look for, you know. So there's actually things that we need to look for as regular individuals when we're walking down the street, so we can make sure that the next little girl or boy doesn't get kidnapped.
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was under the impression prior to getting educated and trained that it was a white van that comes down the street,
Right.
snatches up or kidnaps a kid. And the reality is that that's a myth, and that's a very small percentage of the victims that we see. Typically, we see survivors of victims of human trafficking that go to school every day, that are active in their community, and they're typically being trafficked by a family member. Majority of the victims are trafficked by family members because of substance abuse issues. So I sold my TV, I've sold the car. What else do I have left? I have my child here to get my next fix.
Are you serious?
When you think about victims of human trafficking, they come in all colors and shapes. Most people think that it's just females. There's also males that are victims of human trafficking. The age varies of the start of human trafficking between 12 and 15. But I've seen cases where there was, an infant being trafficked, sexual traffic at that, which is just horrific.
How do you catch these? How do they catch these individuals? And how do these victims come to you? Do they run away? Like, how do they even come to the door?
Yeah, so what our program does is we're not out there working directly with victims. What we do is provide education, awareness, in hopes that everyday people will understand how to recognize it so that they can report it. Then we allow the law enforcement to do what they do, which is go out and investigate and actually, get those perpetrators of human trafficking. So we make sure the folks that are out there serving the victims, one, have the education, know how to recognize and identify it, and secondly, they know how to take care of those victims once they actually are in their facilities.
How would I? What would be like a quick pro code? I want to learn so I can see what would you tell me to look for?
Yeah. So oftentimes when you see young people, male or female, that are with a particularly older person, when you see a young person or individual who does not have control of their documents like their wallet, their ID, when you see young people that have large amounts of money that they don't work, or they have very expensive items that they don't have the resources to pay for, those I would say red flags or warning signs. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're being trafficked, but those are things that make you want to ask additional questions. Or if you see young people that have tattoos of a particular person's name that are visible on their neck or their hand, those are typical signs. But again, I would always tell people that those are just signs. They may not necessarily reflect trafficking, but those are the things that make you want to ask additional questions.
Yeah, but I would be kind of scared to just go up to a random person and be like, hey, are you okay? Are you know what I mean? Is there a way to, you recognize it and you see it, then what do you do? Because
You
people
report
still
it.
have, okay, so you just say something looks suspicious to me.
Yeah, and I always tell people to contact the National Human Trafficking Hotline, even if they just suspect something. Because here's the deal: if you see a young person that you think is being trafficked, right, and you were able to say, "Hey, she had a gray shirt on, some gray pants, and she got into a red car," and I happen to actually see the same thing, and we both call in. And I say, "Hey, I was able to get the license plate number." Law enforcement are able to take those items together and work collectively and potentially get a perpetrator versus if we don't say anything and then the young persons end up in a horrific or tragic situation. So they're able to utilize the resources and the information to investigate it. But if we don't call it in, they don't have anything to investigate.
So you've actually have spoken with individuals that have been involved in human trafficking, I take it.
Absolutely. We're
Without
fortunate.
giving their names. I mean, like, what was two of the most horrible things that you go, I can't believe that happened?
Yeah, I would say, all of the stories are, just you can't believe it that you're hearing it. But I think for me, one of the things that when I got educated on this, I always thought it was a stranger. I always thought it was somebody that came from the neighborhood that, was the creepy person.
Right.
But in reality, most of the victims that we work with, they knew their trafficker. It was an uncle, it was a brother, it was a mom's friend, it was a mom or dad, it was stepfather, stepmother. And so oftentimes you hear that repeatedly from victims. It's very rare that I've personally heard a story from a victim that was a complete total stranger.
Really?
Yeah. And I would add most of the young people that we've provided resources for, they were Hoosiers. They were not somebody coming from another state or another country. And I think that's another big myth that we have as well.
Why do you think we're not shining more light on prevention?
Yeah.
Because until you came here, I wouldn't recognize any of that stuff. I would probably walk around oblivious.
Yeah. So when you think about labor trafficking, I'll start with that because that's not often talked about a lot. Outside of the 92 counties in Indiana, outside of Northwest Indiana, Gary, outside of Northeast Fort Wayne, Indianapolis, Central, and then Evansville in the South, the majority of our state is rural. And so we're known as an agricultural state. We have various crops that have to be produced. Well, how often and how easy it is to bring in labor or to treat people unfairly if you don't have access to programs that are actually, saying, hey, this is what you need to be paying your workers. This is how often they should get a break. And so it's very easy in a rural state. But I think sometimes living in a state like Indianapolis or Gary, where it's more, urban, you forget that we're a very rural state. On the flip side of that, when you look at sex trafficking, well, if you're a sex trafficker, you have to have a buyer. Who are typically the buyers of sex from trafficking victims? Typically, not always, but typically they are white males with influence or disposable income.
Right.
When you think about the people that make the laws in the state, they're typically white males with disposable income. So why make a penalty even harder to prevent it when I'm participating?
Woo, okay. Wow. That's speechless, but it sounds 100% accurate. Let's talk about the third part of your involvement, which is the Chamber of African
The
Men.
Indianapolis Commission on African American Males.
I never heard of that. Explain that to me.
Yeah, so the Indianapolis Commission of African American Males is I would say, an auxiliary of the Indiana Commission on Social Status of Black Males, which was started in the early 90s to, like I said, provide a report to the General Assembly and to the governor's office on the condition of African American males in those 5 focus areas: employment, criminal justice, health, social factors, education. And we have done a few programs, both at the state level and at the city level. Most recently, pre-pandemic, we would do a thing called the Black Barbershop Health Initiative, where we were in about 15 cities, 60 different barbershops across the state, encouraging particularly Black men, but anybody that came into the barbershop to get serious about their health. So we provided health screenings during the month of April. things like checking out diabetes, cholesterol, and even most recently mental health resources
Right.
have been provided. We also do what is one of the things I created during the time that I served as chair of the Indiana Commission on Black Males was the Young Black Males Matter Day. And that's an opportunity for 300 African American boys to come from all over the state of Indiana, come to the State House, get a tour of their State House, learn how a bill becomes a law, learn how to advocate for the things that are important to them, and then most importantly, have a one-on-one conversation with their respective legislator or senator. And so we've been doing that for a number of years. And then one of the big things that we're known for is the annual conference where we do that typically in the fall of the year. We bring in dynamic speakers such as, Reverend Run from Run DMC, Nuri Muhammad, who's here locally, Dr. Frederick Douglass Haynes, who's now the president of the Rainbow Push Coalition, Michael Eric Dyson, to really come in and empower those that work directly with African American males and also empower our young African American males from across the state.
What do we need to do in a society to change the narrative all across the board, not just black, not just white, not just net? What do we need to do to change this narrative?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, the reality of America in 20 years is going to be a different reality than what it was 20 years ago. And what I mean by that statement is that for the first time in history, we will truly have the Rainbow Coalition when you think about America. There will be more people of color in 2040 than ever in the history of America. And so what that means is that those diverse experiences will, I think, make our country greater. I think that we're at a point where folks are starting to realize that, and it's scaring some folks because some folks in some segments of the population are wondering, what if the people of color just do half of what we did to them? What would the society look like? Do you know if Barack Obama had did what his predecessor did on January 6th, how much of a people we would have been so disappointed in?
Yeah.
His whole legacy would have been built around that. And so I think for us, it's a time for us to come together. It's a time for us to unify. And it's a time for us to not just celebrate diversity, but make sure that it's incorporated in every aspect of our society and our community.
Before we wrap up, I'm going to talk about something that we didn't address, which is our penal system. And what do we need to do to offer something besides recidivism? I mean, I remember when we talked about this when we had the mayor of Carmel on talking about providing jobs, providing equal housing. I mean, we see prices on everything going up, but we're not doing anything to help us get to making this kind of money, to having the opportunities to have what the have-nots have. But we see tons of recidivism no matter what color you are. Naturally, it's a little bit more higher in the minority group, but what have you seen as far as change and what needs to change?
Yeah, I think we as a community have to change some of our ways of thinking. Too often we buy what we don't need to impress folks we don't like, and we spend too much time being consumers and not producers. And what I mean by that, when you think about the education statistics in our state, how many kids do you think got a dictionary for Christmas this past year? How many kids you think got a thesaurus this past Christmas? So we provide, iPhones, iPads, Apple Watches, Beats by Dre. Now, understanding that we're killing ourselves because the same people that we're spending major bucks with during that Thanksgiving to Christmas period, when you look at the chart of ownership, most of those corporations that we give our dollar to are the same corporations that own our private prison systems. So we're instead investing in our own detriment by not providing our kids the opportunities and resources. I learned a long time ago that it is better to teach your kids what you don't know than to give them what you didn't have.
How can the viewers reach out to you?
Absolutely. I am on social media, Kenneth Biznessman Allen on Facebook, Kenneth Biznessman Allen on Instagram, Kenneth Biznessman Allen on Twitter.
this has been truly an enlightenment show because I had no idea on how severe human trafficking was, not even how to recognize it, but you taught me things to look for. Had no idea that usually it's somebody that you know. Didn't understand the movements that are taking place with IPS in your role. I appreciate you doing that for everybody in this city, and more importantly, the African American male coalition that you're part of as well. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show.